All right, let's dive right into a really perplexing case. It's one of those stories that, just seems to defy all logic. We're going to look at a situation where the consequences feel completely, totally disconnected from the actions that supposedly caused them. And we'll use a fascinating philosophical lens to try and make sense of it all.
So here it is, the central puzzle we're gonna unpack. It all starts with something super simple, an everyday online action. I mean, it's something millions of us do, probably without even a second thought.
And look, we're not talking about some viral post or a massive online campaign here. Not even close. The scale of this activity was, well, it was practically invisible. The account had less than 100 followers. The posts themselves got almost zero interaction. We're talking crickets.
And there's the shocking conclusion, a sentence of 1 year and 8 months. I mean, it seems completely and totally disproportionate, right? And that's exactly why we need to dig deeper here. To really get how this happened, we can't just look at the action itself.
Now, to understand the verdict, you've got to understand the language. We have to look past the simple act of forwarding a tweet and really put the specific words the court used under a microscope, because that's where the real story unfolds. It's all in the language.
Okay, so Section 1, a scholar jailed for tweets. Let's get into the basic facts of the case, which centers on a scholar named Chen-Jing Yuan.
So, this quote is straight from the court documents. Listen to these phrases: picking quarrels and provoking trouble, causing severe chaos and public order. These words are at the absolute heart of this story. And you can see, right? They're incredibly powerful, but they're also incredibly vague.
And if you look at the defendant's profile, the whole thing just gets even more mysterious. We're talking about Chen-Jing Yuan, a PhD in physics, an independent scholar. The scale of his online activity that was even cited in the case, it was tiny. Fewer than 100 followers and less than 100 posts forwarded, in total over several years. And yet the sentence was 20 months in prison. The math just doesn't seem to add up.
And this timeline, wow, it just shows you how fast this whole situation escalated. He gets arrested in September 2022, and by May of the very next year, that's it. He has a final, unappealable verdict. His appeal was rejected without even getting a new hearing. It all happened incredibly quickly.
So, the big question is, how do we even begin to make sense of a case like this? Well, we can actually turn to a really powerful tool from 20th century philosophy. It's called logical positivism. And you can think of it like a toolkit that's designed for one specific job: to clarify language and get to the verifiable truth.
And here's the core idea. It's actually pretty simple. For logical positivists, if you can't test a statement with observable, real-world evidence, then it's not a factual claim. It might be an expression of emotion. It could be a command. Maybe it's just poetry. But it's not a statement of fact that can be called true or false.
So this philosophy gives us a really crystal clear framework, kind of like 4 pillars. First, you've got the verification principle. Basically, if you can't test it, it's meaningless as a fact. Second, there's the empirical foundation. Knowledge has to be based on stuff you can actually observe. Third, a huge one, the fact versus value distinction. What is totally different from what ought to be. And finally, the whole point is to eliminate metaphysics, to just clarify language and get rid of all that vague, untestable stuff.
All right, Section 3, language on trial. This is where it gets interesting. Let's actually put the court's language to the test using this philosophical toolkit. We're going to analyze the key claims made in that verdict.
Okay, so legal claim number 1 was that he was spreading false information. Now, the prosecution argued that the posts he forwarded, and we're talking about things like political cartoons, academic articles, personal opinions, that all this stuff was false information.
So, if we apply our philosopher's test, logical positivism would immediately make us ask a really critical question. Can a work of art, an opinion, or a personal feeling be empirically verified as true or false? I mean, is a political cartoon a factual statement you can prove wrong? Is an academic opinion false information? According to this philosophy, no way. These things exist outside the realm of verifiable fact. They're expressions, not factual claims.
Then we have legal claim number 2, causing severe chaos in public order. Now, this was the absolute central justification for the conviction. The whole idea was that his almost invisible online activity somehow created a major disturbance in society.
And again, the philosopher's test demands we look for concrete proof. So let's just forget the scary-sounding label for a second. Where is the observable, verifiable evidence? Were there protests, disruptions, any data at all that proves severe chaos actually happened? If you can't point to any of that, a logical positivist would say the statement, "severe chaos occurred," is essentially meaningless as a statement of fact.
Okay, moving on to Section 4, fact versus feeling. This distinction we've been talking about between provable facts and statements that just express an emotion or a political value. It is absolutely crucial to understanding this case through that philosophical lens.
And this quote from the philosopher A.J. Ayer, one of the big names in logical positivism, just sets this up perfectly. He argued that moral and political statements aren't true or false, they just express emotion. So when someone says, that policy is wrong, they aren't stating a verifiable fact. They're basically just expressing a feeling, kind of like shouting "goo" to that policy.
Okay, this table really lays out the whole philosophical critique in one spot, so let's just walk through it. First, verification. The charge disrupted order can't be tested with evidence. So a positivist would call that a pseudo-proposition. It looks like a fact, but it isn't. Then, language. The legal terms are super vague and rhetorical. They're not being used to describe reality, they're being used to compel a certain outcome. Next, fact versus value. The verdict just mushes political values and facts all together. Philosophers call this a category error. It's like asking, what's the color of the number 9? And finally, evidence. There's no causal link shown between the tweets and any actual harm. So the whole ruling is what you'd call a non-empirical claim.
So where does all this analysis leave us? Well, in our final section, let's look at the two completely competing views of justice that really clashed in this case side by side.
And this comparison, it really gets to the absolute heart of the conflict. You see the prosecution's logic on one side. Forwarding so-called false information is, by its very nature, disruptive. They even argued that because Chen was highly educated, it must have been malicious. For them, the act itself was the crime. But the defense's rebuttal was totally rooted in evidence. They said, wait a minute, opinions in art can't be false. His professional knowledge actually proved the action was harmless. And most importantly, for something to be a crime, you have to show evidence of actual severe harm.
And in the end, the way the case concluded, well, it reveals everything. The final appeal was rejected on the grounds that the defendant did not provide new evidence. And this is such a crucial point. It completely shifted the burden of proof. Suddenly, the prosecution didn't have to prove harm anymore. Instead, the defendant was expected to disprove a claim that was never based on any verifiable evidence in the first place.
And that brings us to the final big question. A question that, extends way beyond just this one case. Logical positivism was designed to draw a bright line between meaningful, testable statements and, everything else, metaphysics, emotion. So it forces us to ask, when the law itself starts using untestable, unprovable claims to deliver a verdict, what does it become? Is it still a system of rational justice, or has it turned into something else entirely? And that right there is the philosophical puzzle this case leaves us to think about.